Right, so to help us go back now and relive the last 30 minutes, we're joined by Helen Carr. She is a historian and a writer. Helen, good evening to you. Good morning in Australia.
Thank you.
I have to say, we saw the procession just emerge into Buckingham Palace. It was an extraordinary sight, and just from a personal point of view, I have goosebumps. It was just such a powerful thing, seeing that, and a bit emotional too, by the fact that she's now returned home.
Yeah, in many ways she has returned home, because of course Buckingham Palace has been a royal family home since Queen Victoria established herself there in 1837. But really, Elizabeth II used it as a centre of royal administration. That's where offices were based, that's where she conducted so much of her work, her business, her office as Queen. You know, that's where so many prime ministers were received, from Churchill. And of course, the most recent Prime Minister, Liz Truss, was probably the only Prime Minister during Elizabeth's reign that didn't actually make it to meet her at Buckingham Palace. But it was an incredibly important place for the Queen, and will be for King Charles going forward.
She was greeted by King Charles inside Buckingham Palace. There was such a big moment there. The crowds here were cheering, respectful cheer, punctuated with silent solemnity. But he didn't hang around too long inside Buckingham Palace this evening, perhaps half an hour, then he goes to Claret's house. But for her to come home for one night, for the crowds to be here, it's a big moment, isn't it?
Yeah, and so much of this procession, and I think we could call it that, a royal procession.
This is the shot here. It's coming around again, but yeah. Carry on, sorry, yeah.
A royal procession sort of coming home, as you say it, from Balmoral. And I think, Balmoral was in many ways also a home for her. I think it was a place that she, in many ways, wanted to spend her final weeks and months. But coming back, that procession back it's a traditional process for with the death of a monarch. It's something that has been happening for hundreds and hundreds of years, way back to the Middle Ages. If a monarch died, for example, in a palace outside of London, she would be processed through the country to finally arrive again at Westminster Hall, which is where the Queen, of course, is going to be placed tomorrow. So coming back via Buckingham Palace, I think is such a nod to her role and her duty. This was the seat of duty. That's why it is such an important palace, and it was an important palace to her.
I've heard it say that Buckingham Palace is the office, Windsor is the home.
Absolutely, yeah.
And she's in the Bow Room now until tomorrow at 2:22.
Yeah.
Tell us about the Bow Room and the history around the Bow Room. It's often where she greeted heads of state, had a spot of lunch as they arrived.
Yeah, the Bow Room is the west wing of Buckingham Palace, and as you say, it is an important room. It's where she greeted many people. She greeted, from sports personalities to US presidents. It was an important place of greeting. So I suppose you could look at it as a transitional room, which is perhaps why it has been the chosen location, a thoughtful location, I think, for tonight. It is a place of transition, and it's sort of that space in between rooms in the palace. It's not too personal, but it's not outside of the palace. It's very much within the walls.
It's quite a nice synergy, isn't it? She's home tonight. She'll say goodbye to the British people over the next couple of days, and then she finally is reunited with Prince Philip.
Yeah.
It's a lovely synergy to that, a process to it, but also the Princess Royal, Princess Anne. She has been on the journey all the way from Balmoral, and I think her duties end here tonight in terms of the escort of her mother. Is that correct?
Yeah, she has been a stoic presence. I mean, that wonderful curtsy that she did in Edinburgh was just...
It was so subtle.
It was so subtle, and it was demure, and it was respectful, and it is in a way representative of that's very quiet, silent nod that the Queen gave to Diana's coffin as it passed during the funeral of the Princess of Wales back in 1997. So I think that there is a subtle grief that is existing underneath all of this ceremony that is very much there within the royal family.
Helen, sorry, just for our generation, Princess Diana's death some 25 years ago was such a huge moment. The flowers, the outpouring of grief, the way that ricocheted around the world, if you like. Her funeral was a ceremonial funeral. What we're going to see is a state funeral on Monday. They're very different, aren't they?
They're very different, and it's something that we've not seen really since the death of Winston Churchill, who also lay in state in 1965, which is something that many of us will not remember. And what is extraordinary for people who are living in the UK, and I'm sure for people watching this as well, is certainly the whole of my lifetime, Elizabeth has been Queen, and so it is an extraordinary feeling and a historic feeling, of course, to sort of witness that change. And as a historian, this is something I talk about and read about and research all the time, but to actually be living it is quite something.
So just out of curiosity, I mean, as it turned out, she died in Scotland, and she's the first monarch to have died in Scotland in 550 years or something like that. What would have happened if she had passed away here in London? Where would the procession have gone then? What was the plan?
I don't know if there would have been she wouldn't have necessarily been moved and done a tour of the city, but there would have certainly been a very formal procession, what we'll see tomorrow, from Buckingham Palace to Westminster Hall, which is kind of the key point, the key transitional point within the whole protocol.
How beautiful that she was able to say goodbye to Scotland in that way.
Yeah, favourite
place. It was an important place to her.
Yeah.
She was very connected to nature, and that was her place that she connected to herself and to her history.
Charles? Is he as connected to Scotland?
Yes, I think he is. I think he is as connected to Scotland. I think his love of nature very much was developed in Scotland through his family holidays there. You know, he talks about preservation of wildlife and the countryside, and I think that is something he takes very seriously.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your time. Thank you for your insight, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.